Welcome to Storytelling. This episode features a communications consultant and copywriter who works with some of the best known businesses in the UK. In his spare time, he is a stand-up comedian, speaker and speaking coach. I was recently finding it hard to overcome some fears. This is the advice he gave me. Please welcome Dan Magill.
Winston Churchill said, "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's having the courage to continue that counts." Do you remember the story of the three little pigs? Of course you do. We've all heard that story. But have you heard the latest on those pigs? No. Well, 25 years have passed, and those three little pigs have now become three very old pigs. But thanks to the wonders of modern social networks for pigs like Instaham, HogZap, and Facebook, don't look that last one up, by the way. The three pigs have arranged to meet up for the first... Meet up, there's another good one. Anyway, they've arranged to meet up for the first time since those fateful days when the big bad wolf was huffing and puffing his way about town. We pick up the story in a restaurant, a vegetarian restaurant of course, where the three pigs are busily catching up on the events of the last 2 decades. The cleverest pig, the pig who built the brick house and successfully defeated the wolf, he's the first to speak. "Well, after I killed the wolf all those years ago, I moved away to a new town and I built myself a new house. I was so afraid another filthy old wolf would come along, I made that house even more secure than the last. I blocked up the chimney. I built a moat around the perimeter. And I encased the entire building in walls of steel. I felt so safe and secure in my new home, I started going outside less and less. In fact, I'm really rather sad to say that this is the first time I've left my home in more than 10 years. And when I finally did come outside, the locals said to me, 'Oh, Jeremy, you silly old ham, there hasn't been a wolf in town the entire time you were locked away.' Feels like I've made a bit of a pig's ear of it all, really." The second pig looked up from her plate and said, "I'm afraid my story's very much the same. After the wolf blew down my stick house, I also moved away to a new town and built myself a new house. But another wolf came along and blew down that house. So I moved away again. But the same thing happened, and the same thing kept happening. And I kept running away, and I kept starting again. And I'm actually feeling really rather sad too, because over the last 25 years, I must have lived in 100 different towns. And it means I've never had the chance to make any real friends or to find another pig I could settle down and start a family with." It was the final pig's turn to speak. The other 2 pigs noticed he was covered in scars from head to toe, or pulled pork, as they called it. But he seemed so much happier and more content than they did. As George Orwell said, all pigs are created equal. But this pig looked more equal than the other 2. Well, I won't lie. When you 2 left town, I was feeling really rather sad too. But I built myself a new straw house in exactly the same place. Of course, I was terrified another wolf would come along. But I love straw houses and I love this town, and I wasn't going to change my ways for anyone. Of course, one day another wolf did come along and he blew down my house. So I rebuilt it again in exactly the same place. And the wolf kept coming, but I kept rebuilding. Until one day I'd had enough. It was the final straw. And I started to study the work of different psychologists, as pigs do. Like Philippe Goldin, who said, when it comes to fear, the only way out is through. And exposure is by far and away the best method for dealing with phobias, fears, or anxieties of any kind. So the next time the wolf came, I went outside and I fought with him. And that's how I got all these scars. But I survived. And the next time we fought again. And I kept on fighting. And each time it got just that little bit easier. Until one day the wolf grew weary and he stopped coming. And the locals were so thrilled they made me Lord Mayor. And I now live in a huge straw house right in the centre of town with my wife and 3 little pigs. There's no denying that those 3 pigs went through a very stressful time at the hands of the wolves. And we certainly can't blame them for developing phobias on the back of it. But each of them chose to deal with their fears in a different way. The first pig hid away for the rest of his life. The second fled time after time. But remember Churchill's quote, "Failure is not fatal." Well, it was the third pig, the failure of the original story. He was the one who found the courage to stand up to his fears, eventually moving toward them, and ultimately defeating them. Let's put the pigs to one side for a moment. Wrap them in blankets. And let's think about some of the things we're afraid of as humans. Heights, flights, speaking and spiders, big spaces, small spaces, strangers and outsiders. Things that might happen, but almost never. And others that have happened and, well, they're fixed forever. The list goes on. Don't worry, the poetry doesn't. But I'm not sure it matters so much exactly what we're afraid of. Surely what matters most is how we're able to try and deal with our fears. Which of those 3 pigs will you be? I know which pig it's most difficult to be. I know which pig will leave you covered in scars and potentially marching headlong into the greatest battle of your life. But it's by having the courage to become that pig that we'll eventually find the greatest fulfillment, an inner peace and an outer confidence. Which of those 3 pigs will you be? Will you hide away? Will you run away? Or can you go back and find a way? In the words of Aristotle, nothing in this life is possible without courage.
Dan Magill, thank you very much for your time.
No problem, Debbie. Thank you. Pleasure.
The best way to conquer your fears are head on. Are you ready to overcome your fears? Which little pig will you be?